morning, everyone, and happy Friday. Also, I would like to say happy Veterans Day to all of our veterans out there. Thank you for your service. And if you are looking to fill any of your positions for your manufacturing facilities, be sure to check out some of the groups that are available to hire veterans. They're good candidates for those empty positions, and we kind of need their skill set to help fill some of these gaps. Today, I'm really excited because it's not only the 181st episode of Mavens in Manufacturing, but we have Katrina Contaxis here, and she's the president of Gen-El-Mec Associates. Hello, Katrina. How are you doing?
Hey, Megan. Thanks for having me. I'm good. How are
Yep.
you?
Great. And I love your background. I like the Christmas tree back there.
I knew the Christmas tree was going to come up.
All festive. Well, I have no qualms of people putting their lights up. It's the Christmas music that I'm like, don't start that yet. Not that yet. But
Well, it's funny because there's some, some of my coworkers have put rules on me that I'm allowed to start November 1st. And by start, it doesn't mean that you walk in and it looks like Santa threw up in here on November 1st. It means I can start trickling things down. So it'll just slowly morph into a wonderland.
That's funny that they have rules for you. But yeah, let's talk about Gen-El-Mec Associates, because I wasn't familiar with your company until I met you. So I'm really excited to learn more. So can you give us a brief background about what Gen-El is, and then we'll talk about your background as well and how your journey led into being the president of the company?
Sure. So Gen-El-Mec, we are a precision components manufacturing, basically a service. We offer 3 and 5-axis machining, turning, and wire work. But it was actually started by my grandfather in his basement. So I guess we'll just lead into my journey here, because people will always ask me, like, how'd you get here? And I'm like, well, honestly, not nepotism, a series of fated events, but ultimately an unwillingness to accept anything but success is kind of how I got here. But in all seriousness, my journey into this role and the appeal of the industry they're very connected and also has been constantly evolving as I am growing to fill some very large shoes before me, or from before me. My grandfather was a Polish immigrant. He came to the United States through England when he was 17 with his brother and mother, because he was seeking a brighter future after being in a political prison, political prison camp in Russia in his early teen years. And I do mention this after being drafted twice, which is a story for another time, but I think an honorable mention because it is Veterans Day. He did end up being drafted, and then once he was done with his service, he initially worked for a defense contractor called Avco Lycoming. Yes, Avco Lycoming, which is they were making like take engines and those types of things. And during his time there, he saw that they were no quoting some complicated parts, and he said, "Well, I think I can make that." So he ended up buying a Bridgeport, and he stuck it in his basement. And then he began seeking out that kind of complex works. And it quickly caught on, and suddenly he was out of his basement and into his garage. And then all of a sudden he was out of his garage with his brother into an actual building. And that's how Gen-El-Mec was born. What I love most about his story is, besides his audacity to moonlight and continually break rules, because he was basically stealing work from his employer. Not a great look, but it's that he left England to come to the United States to provide a better life for his family. And through all of it, he was not only be able to provide a better life for his family, but for all of the families he employed. So
I like that.
It's much bigger than just him. When my father came into the picture, he had just married my mother. Then he was my mother's father. Dean doesn't have a decorated background. He grew up in an 800 square foot house with his parents and his 2 siblings, and on occasion, both of his half siblings as well. So that's a lot of people in a small house. He ended up going to college part-time while working full-time to support his mother and put his sister through college while his father was, undergoing some health conditions. Zenny, my other grandfather, did try to get rid of Dean because he wasn't Polish. And as you know, Polish immigrants, my mother should have married somebody Polish. But, Zenny ultimately succumbed to it, and they did get married. And once they were married, he said to Dean, you can work here while you get on your feet, and then you can go figure out what you want to do. And then Dean just never left. So that's how Dean, became president of this company as well. I actually just asked Dean recently, I'm like, when was the day? Like, was there a day? And he said, no, not really. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then for me, I've been a part of Gen-El-Mec since I was young, and have worked in various roles, from assembly to shipping and receiving to being a machine operator for one summer. And I've grown up not only learning the ins and outs of the business, but seeing the connection of employee development, involvement, and treatment, or like well-being, being tied to this ultimate success of this company.
Yeah.
I've also worked in various industries, and I'm about to mention someone's name, and she's going to hate this, which makes it funnier. I worked for a woman. Her name is Betsy Soul. She owns a winery in New Jersey. So while not totally manufacturing related, they are making wine. But the family that she is from, they very much have the same belief, which is, you treat your employees well, you show up for them, and they're going to show up for you. And the change in the environment when I was working with Betsy, I've seen it here, but seeing it outside of something that I was so familiar with was very important to me. And it's ultimately something that I take with me. I also don't believe there's such thing as a self-made person. There's always someone there who supported you to get you where you're supposed to go, whether it's a very large position or simply like that time in college, like you're studying overnight and the janitor's like, just keep going. Everyone's there for you. But this industry is important to me because it has provided and continues to provide livelihoods and support families and provide a tangible skill set that no one can ever take from you. It's not, and there's
Did you go into it thinking that you were going to climb up the ladders?
No,
as you did?
Our CEO would hate that I say this. I actually said no to him the first time he asked if I want to sit president of this company. Because I envisioned it differently. I envisioned it what my father did, what my grandfather did. And I was like, well, I don't have that skill set. Because, they were very hands-on with the actual machining of stuff. Like Dean will still come in and do some manual machining work. So, but over time, these things grow. I guess it's my inability to quit that Rick sees, where even when I'm down, I just keep showing up. But there is something to be said for people that can take like a chunk of metal, right? Just a chunk of metal, and turn it into something that is like floating in space, taking pictures of like molecular clouds, having little star babies, or, developing housings for defensive weapon systems to save lives. It's something that's really admirable to do. So long story long is, my journey hasn't been linear, and nor did I have some intentional 5-year plan to get here. I've just kind of shown up every day wanting to be helpful and provide support in order to preserve something that I feel is very important to us, not only as individuals, but as a country.
Yeah. So what is your plan moving forward in your journey? Are you hoping to one day like take over the company and keep running it? Like what's your plan there?
So we did back in August 23, go through a sale process with a private equity backed system. We're now a part of the BTX Precision Components manufacturing platform. Currently, we have 3 companies. It's ourselves, a larger company in Chicago, which is they're called ERA Industries, and then a 3D printing company out in Redmond, Oregon, i3D. So when it comes to the vision of the next 5 years, it's kind kind of hard to say. I'm already in the position of driving the strategic movement of Gen-El-Mec, but it does always match what the strategic initiatives of BTX are. Ultimately, we picked BTX because they don't have people. A lot of private equity backed companies that buy manufacturing companies kind of buy you, bring their people in, and then that's how a lot of the historic knowledge is lost. But here they don't have people. They're buying you. Like they're buying you as the people. Arguably the management team is more important than what you actually produce. Obviously, it has to fit within the strategic initiatives, but it's the teams more so than the other, like some other weighted capacities. But so moving forward, it's just doing what I can do to support, our larger initiatives, but also I do feel all of these things connect. If you treat people well, you provide education, it's going to ultimately serve the parent company.
Absolutely. So let's dive into that a little bit, because I'm hearing a lot more. I don't know. I don't want to call it a buzzword, because once you call something a buzzword, it seems to like fade out because nobody wants to jump on the bandwagon of calling it a buzzword because they want to be trendy and hip and new. But there is a lot of conversation around bringing the human back to manufacturing and having it more human centric. And I've had several conversations recently around, what companies should do to really change the mindset in their culture, because there are studies out there, the happier your employees are, the more productive they are. So if we can change some of these things where traditionally they haven't been done a certain way, that seems to help the situation. So how do you bring, business is fundamentally human principle into your daily operations at Gen-El?
So the one thing here is, I took the seat June 1st this year, so 2024. So it's been a little over 5 months or so. And I want to be clear, I'm not one for virtue signaling. I believe in the importance of taking meaningful action. And I did find some of these questions hard to talk about, like with diversity, adaptability, workforce involvement, all these things, because I haven't made significant strides yet in some of these things. It can be a little disheartening at times to feel like I haven't accomplished much, but I know how critical these issues are. So when I talk about this, I'm like, this is what I want to do moving forward. I was hoping to have more movement before then, but transition and leadership can always be, it's just you never know. Every day is a new day. So that being said, because I did say, I'm like, business is fundamentally human. It's really easy for us to get caught up in, AI and all these fun and new exciting technologies. But it's really important to remember that, like, there is still a person building that, feeding it data, doing these things. And especially with AI, like, people have to remember what you put in, you get out. So AI is not there's no brain. I mean, there is a brain, but there can still be data biases in there, because there are still humans, feeding it information that it's learning from, and it may not have the whole story. I'm trying to think of the best way to say this without it's so important for us to be connected. All of these things, it feels so hard, but it's really not. Basically, you have humans and we're all here. And I will say that from my experience, people generally do want to produce, and they generally do want to do a good job. A lot of times you just have to give them the resources to do that, or provide the structure or whatever. Very rarely do people not want to produce. By when I say business is fundamentally human, it's saying you have to understand that every person is showing up and doing the best they can. And if there's something that's happening that you don't love, you should look at how you're looking at it, or how you're doing things, or how it was taught, or their previous training. It's so easy for people to go, oh, that was just not a high performer or this. No, a lot of times maybe you're not adapting to some of the needs they have. When you're in our industries, specifically what we're in, you know, I think less than 10% of shops in the entire country do some of the tolerances that we do, which, you know, can be anywhere from 1 to 2/10 with true position surfaces, you know, holes. Um, People who have the audacity and grit and are tenacious enough to figure out how to do this, they're not always the easiest personalities.
Right.
Because you kind of have to be a little
Yeah.
bit of like, I'm going to figure this out. So sometimes they have very large opinions. And
Which
it's
is
our
okay.
job. No, it's our job to figure out how to best either motivate them or inspire them or move them so everyone's happy. Like we get, you know, the parts we need and they are fulfilled. And, you know, sometimes it is listening to them and they have a point. You're like, that's not
Right.
how it's gonna work, you know? So it's when I say business is fundamentally human, it's like, guys, it's not, yeah, we should, you have a list of rules, you have to show up every day in this, but sometimes I think you have to approach people on a more individual basis, especially when you're doing something this hard.
Yeah. Well, and that was one of the points that came up in a recent conversation that I had, specifically around AI, where, you know, when things go down on a line or things happen on the shop floor, it's the operators who have that detailed information of what's going on and why it happened and how to figure it out and fix it and maintain it. And that knowledge in their brain is not always getting entered into something for AI to pull from. And operators do things differently from person to person. So just because one operator fixed something a certain way doesn't mean the next operator is going to fix it the same way. They're going to do what works for them and makes their process a lot easier. So those conversations with the people on the shop floor are so essential with how your business runs and how successful it can be. So I'm glad that you like pointed that out, because I think we tend to forget that, especially with some of these advanced technologies. We forget that the people on the shop floor are there every single day and know they probably sleep about it and dream about it, you know. And when they go home, they're it I don't know if it keeps them up at night, but they're probably having dreams about it as well. I do want to talk about like workforce and talent develop, like workforce and talent, because what you also said too, you know, some people who have been in this industry will have really strong opinions. And, you know, there's this thing that happens between generations where, you know, the older generations say something negatively about younger generations after them. It happens every single cycle. And the one thing about Generation Z, there's this assumption that a lot of them don't want to work and they might not be attracted to manufacturing because of the labor that is involved to be hands-on. And I don't know if Gen-El is doing anything to like bring those different generations together, or if you have some ideas of your own, but like what sort of things can companies do to really set up all generations for success and where they are being collaborative and communicating with one another? Because that collaboration is essential to for innovation and to bring new ideas to the table. Like everybody needs to be talking to one another. So what sort of things, you know, is Gen-El currently doing? If they're not, like what sort of ideas do you have to bring that to fruition?
So recently, obviously we have, you know, tech schools. You know, they have access to different resources. But recently I started working with our local town school, Oxford Public Schools, and then I'm also going to work with Seymour Public Schools to help them build certain manufacturing programs. And we may even donate some of our older equipment, like the Bridgeports.
That's really
Because,
cool.
yeah, we have tech schools, but not all kids have access to those resources. You know,
Mm-hmm.
not all kids can go to tech school. Not all, you know, or some kids may not even know it's there. That's the other thing. They may not even
Mm-hmm.
know that's an optionality. So when you know, like the thing that I've always been, you know, sad about was like I was still a kid that had shop, like wood shop class and elementary school and all of that. So, and that's over the years has been lost. And things have been more structured to just, math, history, this. But, some kids out there, they're not going to be historians or doctors or lawyers. They like to do stuff with their hands. They like to be busy. They like to, and the one thing I'll say about Gen Z, and I don't know, it's probably the computer generation, but they have a thing for instant gratification. Like they do. And the one thing with machining is like, well, listen, you get to see your work right in front of you. It's not you working towards being a doctor where for 6 years you're just like grinding at school or doing this. Over time, you can see what you've made. So the one thing I'll give Gen Z, I know everyone says they don't want to work, they don't want to work. The one thing I will say that I've noticed with them is I don't know if they learned from the millennials, like about, a lot of millennials had issues buying houses or all of these things through whatever opinion you have on how it happened. But I think Gen Z saw that and they're very quick to jump jobs because they know they have to move fast to get ahead. The problem with that, especially in this industry, is yes, you might make more money because you jump, but you're not actually developing like that core knowledge base of something very specific, especially with what we do. You need to spend a lot of time doing it. So, but I think if we leverage the need for instant gratification, it's going to be easier to move Gen Z into this direction, because it's also like, well, you can make money too. Like within 4 or 5 years outside of high school, yeah, your co-students or who you went to high school with might just be getting out of college, and you might already be making, if you're very good, like $90,000 to $120,000 a year.
Yeah,
you're way far ahead. Yeah, you're way far ahead. So I'm hoping that with working with more local public schools and just introducing this. But we also have to make it like fun again. And that might be doing things like utilizing social media, like reels. And, I've seen videos of woodworkers showing different types of things they do, or like, it's just, you have to get it out there and let them know, like, it's not this dirty, disgusting environment that that they probably think about. Our shop is it's so clean. So I don't know.
Yeah, my daughter is going to school for surgical nursing, and I've mentioned this a dozen of times. But the reason why she's doing that is because of Grey's Anatomy, which is nothing like. I just was like, there's nothing in like that's not what they focus on. But because she saw the operations and that struck her interest to research it more, because she's like, they don't really talk about surgery on that show. Like it's just more about the drama. So then she started following all these weird Instagram channels of like plastic surgeons and people getting mauled by bears and then getting put back together. Like she was fascinated by it. And I'm like, that's weird. Like, I don't know why you're looking at that stuff, but she is finishing up her 3rd year. She's super excited about doing clinicals. But the other thing is where we're at, because I think it's dependent on the community you're in too, and what leadership you have in your community. But where we're at, all of her friends wanted to go to 4-year college, university type education. And when I brought up engineering and manufacturing to them, they were like, why would we do that? Like, what's available? Like, they just didn't know the opportunities. So now I'm like, okay, we need to really push the manufacturing narrative in my community so that we can give those kids who, because I didn't like school. I hated it. And if I knew that doing hands-on work was more of a thing that I could pursue instead of English, I probably would have did that. But we definitely need to change it. So it's interesting that we do have a comment that came in from David Turner. Great discussion. If I had known about these opportunities back in high school, I would have definitely jumped on board. Me too, David. Like, but I was told to go into marketing, which is fine. Like, I love what I'm doing now because I get to share stories, but definitely feel the same. The other thing is too, is one of the things that I think we're on the right track. I would like to see it happen a little bit quicker, but 30% of manufacturing is women. I read a statistic where globally women represent 13% in engineering, which is crazy because I thought there was more. And then one in four leaders in manufacturing is women. So every fourth leader is a woman. How do you what do you think we need to do in terms of really encouraging women to pursue not only this sector, but also pursue those promotions, pursue investing in themselves and like learning how to negotiate so that they can have those conversations around finances? Like, how did you personally move up the ladder? Like, what were some of the things that helped you get to the position where you're at right now? Because I think a lot of women are either they don't know how to do it, or they're intimidated to do it, or they suffer from, I don't think I'm good enough for this position, so I'm just going to stay where I'm at.
Well, imposter syndrome, I think we could all talk about that for decades.
Yeah. I'm trying to get rid of it.
Yeah, the only way to get rid of that is just to move through it. That's it. You just have it. And then ultimately I may not be the best person, to speak on how do you break through that glass ceiling, just because I probably would not have gotten this opportunity had I not been born into it. That being said, it was not something that I ever thought was mine or I automatically deserve just because of who I am. It all happened I just kept showing up and being helpful and saying yes and just doing whatever is asked of me, ultimately to support my core belief that I don't ever want this industry or what we do here to get lost. There's clearly a need for it. Say women entering the manufacturing industry will face certain challenges that I'm sure any female listening is laughing. Because one pretty significant perception but arguably both genders will run into this is, did they earn this role? And you might meet some skepticism and disrespect, but you just have to keep showing up and moving through it in a way with whatever drives you, whether it be grace or whatever your primary drivers are. You do have to have a little bit of a thick skin and be creative in problem solving and approach and just have this arguably insane resiliency. You just have this grit and this tenacity to refuse any other option except for success. You just say, no, I'm not going to accept it. And if you're in this industry and someone says to you, I don't know how you're doing it or something, or why are you still doing this? The good news is you're on the right path. The bad news is it still could be a very long walk.
Yeah.
But, as Miss Noxima said to Chi-Chi and Tu Wong Fu, thank you for nothing, Julie Newmar, step 2 to becoming a queen is ignore adversity. So that's sometimes what you just have to do. For me, addressing some of these challenges right now really just looks like showing up every day and trying. There are measurable goals where you have to fill this many positions that are female, but ultimately it's about creating the environment that these people would want to be here and they want to invest in you just as much as you invested in them.
So are there programs that you have with because I know you mentioned you want to get more involved with some of the public schools and stuff, but for your current employees, especially with all the advancements in technologies, it's hard, I think, for some businesses to keep up to date and maybe it's more for the small to medium sized shops, but things are changing so quickly and advancing so quickly. Are there things that you all do to really help people progress forward in their careers? Do you offer extra training? Do you offer, hey, if you want to go to school and learn about this, we got you covered? What are some of those things that you're doing to really make sure that your employees are up to date on all the new skills, all the certifications, and they're continuously learning so that they can continue to be successful?
So the one thing about being a part of this larger platform that is a benefit to everybody is there's a lot more room for growth now than there was as a small family-owned business. As a family-owned business, you're kind of just, making sure things get out the door. There's sometimes not always a huge focus on, structure or strategic, intent or initiatives or growth models. So that has been helpful. It also is a sounding board with the other business units about, hey, like we have this problem. And they'll go, oh, no, we sent this person to this school. And so that sounding board has been very useful. And we do send, actually, we have one of our machinists goes to school next week because we did finally we got our first cobot. So he's going out to, it's 3 days of schooling to, also to learn to teach his cobot. So her name's Susan, to do other things too. So, we'll do things like that. We send our quality systems manager out for a lead auditor training. And, I'm starting to work. We have something called CCAT in Connecticut.
Okay.
Which is basic, but they do grants and programs for, reinvesting in your workforce, which could be like sending them to school or, and they'll help pay for some of it because it's very important to make sure you have an engaged workforce.
Yeah. I think that's awesome that you're getting your very first cobot. So congratulations on that. I'd be jumping all over that to learn how to use it. So I went to Virginia to a tech school and they let me play around with their cobot that they had there and stack blocks up on each other. And it was the funnest thing ever. And I think what's cool too about, having some of these opportunities. There was a gentleman at the assembly show I went to, and I was at Pico MES's booth, and he was like, yeah, we had teenagers coming here to try out our digital instructions. And then he was like, oh, it's like playing a video game. And I think we can pitch that to the younger generations because they're all into video games and stuff. And it is pretty similar to how we're controlling some of these things. So I don't know. I think there's a connection there. I do want to talk about, some of stuff around innovation and, things that are upcoming and trends that you're excited about. So, what are some of the things in the machining world that you're getting really excited about and hoping to really bring into Gen-El or hopefully connect with this aside from the cobot thing that you talked about?
Sorry, the dog was snoring and I didn't want it to be overheard in the background, so I just threw Post-its at her.
No worries.
So with the upcoming technology that I'm excited about, the one thing, I was at IMTS and, I don't know if this is there's a company out there, it's CognitionWorks AI, with this transition and, Dean transitioning out with his historic knowledge, but then our old VP of operations advancing upward to be EVP of manufacturing. With Tom, he was here for 20 years, Dean here for 40, and they were the ultimate drivers of Gen-El-Mec as a small family business. When they left, there was a big gap of knowledge. There's a big gap of, stuff that just lived in their brains that they didn't even know to say because it's just a part of their being. So anything upcoming in technology with AI that has to do with capturing that knowledge, whether it be, basically this company specifically, you can film yourself doing something and talk through what you're doing and it'll auto generate work instructions about that task. And which is, it's good because guess what? Machinists are not technical writers. No. So
they just do it.
They just do it. And it's not really fair to ask them to be a technical writer. That's not, but they can talk about it. So it's things like that because ultimately it's about making their lives easier too. Something like that is about making everyone's lives easier. I'm very much a proponent to work smarter, not harder. So any upcoming technology that can help us do that, I will always look into.
That's really cool. You should look into Pico then as well because they're doing digital work instructions, and I'm sure there's something that you can do with those files where they'll actually generate the work instructions. And me with no experience, I did horrible at it, but people who are used to being in things like assembly or machining, they were able to read through the instructions fairly quickly and perform the task fairly quickly. And again, it's just something to if it's a younger generation, they're used to that technology of like reading instructions and then playing Call of Duty, I think.
I don't know
Like
what they do anymore.
yeah, whatever games they're playing, but they're used to that back and forth of like, okay, this is what they're saying, this is what I gotta do now in the game. But that sounds similar to what Pico MES does. So shout out to Pico. It's really cool technology and it's fairly simple. So and it helps people with the onboarding process a lot quicker and the training process a lot quicker. So you're not down as much and you're still being productive, which is super cool.
And it's good for the employees because they don't hit the walls of well, no one told me that, or like they don't hit those discouraging walls of like, well, no one said that or this, like it's right
Yeah.
there, because
Yeah.
sometimes it's no one's real fault that it was never said. Sometimes you don't even know to say it.
Well, and things become so intuitive when you're so used to doing it for so long that you forget about those smaller steps in between the larger steps. So one of the projects that I had to do when I was a technical writer was write instructions on how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And there's so many steps involved that and it was funny because our instructor like went through all of our instructions and we didn't get a sandwich made at all out of all of us. And he was like, you're missing this step. You're missing this. Like, do I open the peanut butter jar? What if there's that film over it? Do I need to take it off? Do I need to put the top back on? Are you putting like, it was just all these silly things. And it was frustrating because it was like, well, this should be obvious. He's like, but if you're writing programs for robotics, it's not obvious to the robot. You have to tell them step by step what to do so they're not missing anything. And I was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So a lot of fun, super frustrating, but it was a good learning experience. Well, Katrina, I want to talk about, what can we look forward to with Gen-El? What are you most excited about? And, what are some of the things that you're hoping to really deploy during the next 5 years? Like what do we have to look forward to coming from Gen-El?
I would really like, I would go back and forth on this with Dean because we basically with I do want to develop a total and like apprenticeship program here. I believe only like 5 to 10% of all manufacturing companies have them. I don't think it's if it is 5 to 10%, that's very little. And one of the reasons why is because Dean and I used to argue. To me and now to him, there is a very large importance on starting from the beginning, as in with manual machines. And yeah, it could be argued, well, everyone's using CNC machines, but I mean, we also have calculators. You still have to learn how to do 2 + 2, on paper. So, establishing those basics, I believe, is a real driver for how successful someone's going to be as a machinist. They know how the metal moves. Yeah, you think this is STEM, it's very scientific, but like it's still an art.
Yeah.
Like how you approach problems, it's an art. And sometimes the best way to learn that is through, the experience of solving smaller problems. So with an apprenticeship program, to me, that's what we do so specific. It gives us the opportunity to create the individual for this, but it also gets it out there. We quote some jobs that most companies won't, and it's great because it's job security. But then 40, I think it was something like 45% of all NPIs on the defense side currently are going unquoted. Like they just won't get quoted. So there's a huge gap. And as technology advances, which means some of our tolerances are getting tighter and tighter. And when you do like space exploration or any of these things, it's going to be needed. So you're going to need more shops like us, which means you're going to need more very skilled labor. So ultimately, I would like to be able to. It is a problem. We're all running into it, no matter what kind of manufacturing it is. It's like quote unquote, there's no one there. So I think we should just focus on making them ourselves and solving our own problem.
Yeah, I think you're on to something and again, each community is different because state law is different across our nation. And I had a conversation at an event that I was at, and I said I wanted to donate money, just money, to a school that I used to go to, because they were struggling with some of the materials and stuff. And they were like, we can't just take your money because we have a process that we have to go through, and we have a limit of how much monetary stuff we can get. But if you want to donate a machine to us, you can do that. I'm like, I can't afford a machine. Like, I can give you a certain amount of money. Yeah. So it was interesting to learn that perspective of it. But yeah, I think a lot of communities are starting to go that apprenticeship route, because then you can pick from the area you're in, and you can mold the people within your community. I noticed that there's a lot of women getting into fabrication, like welding and CNC machining, which is awesome. Really cool.
Yeah, and it's I mean, well, I always think like I always not struggle, but like I'm always cautious for like the mentioning like genders and the differences, just because I think everyone's different anyways. Like if you can't assign,
Yeah.
those like any type of quality to somebody. So, but ultimately, the reason why I am so appreciative that women are starting to do it is the same reason why Zenny moved here and went into it. It provided him a stable lifestyle. And so for women getting into these things, they're realizing, hey, I don't like this is can provide me a stable lifestyle that I can provide for myself.
Yeah.
And in a way that they probably didn't realize, So I always think that part is really, really cool.
I was actually thinking about taking some welding classes and getting involved in welding, because right now there's a huge need for them, and the starting pay is amazing. And I'm like, maybe I just need to take a break from this for a while, go get that certification, and see if I can land a job there. I don't know.
Well, I would support you on that, just because then you might be like, you might not do anything with it, but you might like make art. You never.
Yeah.
It's like I said, you can do like the skill set is so. One of the things we didn't really discuss is like with getting women in the workplace. Yeah, you can have your programs in this, but ultimately it's also about reviewing resumes for transferable skills. You would be shocked about how many skills you have that can be easily transferred into what we do. Especially if you like one of my favorite is, so I am friendly with our quote unquote competitors. Basically, like we do occasionally compete, but we're good. We go to dinner and stuff. But one of her favorite, like one of her employees that does a lot of their deburring now, she was actually a nail tech, but at one of those really fancy nail salons with like, when I don't know what it's even called, so excuse my ignorance, when they do like those very long nails and designs, but it's like very intricate. And the transferable skill is like being able to do something very small and be having delicate hands, and so when you're deburring something small that has critical surfaces, they're used to that.
Yeah.
So there are transferable skills in terms of those even creative problem solving. Sometimes you just need a separate set of eyes, but yeah.
That's really, so when you're trying to recruit though, how do you make sure that you're approaching those groups that you wouldn't traditionally approach before? So like I talked to an HR, or wasn't an HR, was he HR? He's HR, he's in recruiting, but he is from the South, and he said one of the places that nobody was looking into were church groups. And he's like, in the South, churches are everywhere. And he's like, so I just decided to go. And he goes, come to find out, some of these church groups were having career fairs, but nobody in manufacturing were going to the career fairs there. And I'm like, I didn't know that was a thing. And then I actually met someone who got an apprenticeship because she went to a career fair at a church group, and there was one company that, So
well,
are you doing anything?
No, but now I just added church groups.
Yeah, but I didn't
that's
think.
Actually an interesting point, because it's like, well, what else haven't we thought of? Like, so like, what else is there? Because like I've always been in support of hiring, which it's a gray area. Like anybody that has a record of kinds that generally, maybe quote unquote wouldn't be qualified. Obviously, there's risks, or you have to follow whatever, right, like legislation if you're under any, dependent on whatever contracts you have in house. But people do deserve second chances. Sorry. So, it's just exploring those other outlets of like, well, we haven't lived here like us now, church groups. And I'm sure there's many others that we could go down the path. So I'm actually going to think about this over time.
Yeah. Well, Katrina, this has been a really great conversation, and I'm definitely going to be pointing more people in your direction because I think I love your human-centric focus and the fact that you're in CNC machining. That's one of my favorite industries in manufacturing. I just think you guys make a lot of cool things, and you're actually you're like everywhere. If you're a CNC machinist, we probably have touched something that you've made, which is really cool to think about. So I'm going to give you an option for my last question. Do you want to give a piece of advice to our listeners in terms of how to attract more individuals into manufacturing, or do you want to ask them a question?
Ooh, this is hard. I'm like, do I want to ask a question? I'll ask a question because it's always about learning. I mean,
yes, absolutely.
I've talked about me enough. So, for anybody out there who has been in a position like this, was there one specific thing or program, or I guess just the way you led or how you showed up every day that you felt, made the ultimate change in something? As in, maybe you started doing it one way and you took a risk and said, I'm going to try this, and it worked.
That's awesome. I love that question. I'll put that in the post show notes so that you can get answers for that. So that's a really cool question. I like that. Well, Katrina, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day. I know manufacturing gets busy, so I'm very appreciative that you were able to make some time for Mavens today. If people have questions about Gen-El or they want to reach out to you directly, what is the best way to connect with you or get a hold of you?
They can I have my LinkedIn page, which I don't know how to even tag that handle. Sorry, I'm usually good at that type of thing. Or you can email me at it's k.contaxis, CONTAXIS, and it's at GEN-EL-MEC.com.
Awesome. Well, Katrina, thank you so much for joining me again. To all those who are tuning in and listening, be sure to stay tuned for after show notes. We got one more comment in here that I want to make sure that we're pulling up. Daniel Miller says, thank you for sharing. Thank you, Dan, for joining us today. And then for anyone that is tuning in, if you are a veteran, please be sure to reach out to us in manufacturing because we want your skill set. We appreciate your skill set, and you'd be really good in this industry. You can also reach out to Kathy Gallowitz. She is on LinkedIn as well, and she is helping companies develop programs for veterans specifically. I only mentioned that today because today is Veterans Day. I'll probably mention it a few more times because, again, we need all the help that we can get in engineering and manufacturing. And I don't know why your comment is still up there, Dan, but there we go. Got rid of that. And if you stay tuned for a few seconds longer, we have a great sponsor, Fresh Horizons. They are my merch company, and they do amazing stuff for branded materials. So if you are struggling with brand merch, please reach out to them and they will help you with that. So have a great weekend, everyone. Talk to you later. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
This episode of Mavens has been sponsored by Fresh Horizons Group. Fresh Horizons Group is a family-run company that was founded on the premise of helping organizations and businesses better tell their story through high-quality branded apparel and promotional items. Freshen up your brand by contacting Fresh Horizons today at freshhorizonsgroup.com.